All right. Hey, welcome everybody to RevU. It's great to have you here today. And happy 2022. I hope it's a great one for you. I'm really excited about this year. There's so many wonderful things happening in my life, and I feel really blessed. And, you know, it's one of those things where there are also lots of big challenges, and it's all where your focus. So I hope your focus is on the great things that are going to happen and that it's a great year for you. My name is Darren Hill. I am the CEO and co-founder here at RevRoad. And it's a real pleasure to welcome all of you who are here in the room today, as well as those who are online. A couple of announcements that I'd like to share will be what I'll do next. But first, I want to just share briefly what RevRoad is. RevRoad is, anybody want to answer the question or the rest of that statement or fill in the blank? What is RevRoad?
Awesome.
Okay, that's very descriptive. Thank you, Steve. Dan, good to see you. Daniel. So we are pleased to have a chance to work with entrepreneurs across a spectrum of industries to help them grow their businesses. And we actually just passed our 4-year mark, so we're really excited about that. And now have, thank you, we now have 47 companies that are in the RevRoad portfolio. And the growth that has taken place with those companies has been tremendous over that time. We're so thrilled with the progress that's been made. And it's so gratifying to work with incredible entrepreneurs who overcome challenges and take advantage of opportunities and capitalize on the prospects in front of them on a regular basis. And to see their revenue line grow, to see their teams grow, to see their products grow, and to see that turn into really great blessings for their families as well, and for their shareholders. So that's what we do here at RevRoad, and we do that by providing services for 2 years. Just a fun anecdote, when we started 4 years ago, during that first year or so, I think we would have about, I don't know, maybe 25 companies a quarter that would apply for 2 to 3 spots. We now regularly have over 100 companies every quarter that apply for those 2 to 3 spots. So it's been fun to see that grow. And the other indicator of growth that I'm very proud of is the fact that almost all of those now, the leading indicator, or sorry, the leading source of those applicants are from referrals from existing portfolio companies, and so just couldn't be a better endorsement, and I'm so grateful. Now for our announcements. Bathrooms are just out these double doors and to your right, so if you need those, feel free to go use those. If you have questions during the Q&A, we would ask you to please raise your hand and wait for one of the mic runners to bring a mic to you. I know you have a loud voice and you can be heard in this room. The challenge is there are a bunch of people who are online and who will watch the recording later, and those people can't hear you at all, no matter how loud you are in your voice. They have to have this to hear you. So just wait for the microphone for your questions before asking them. If you are online and joining us virtually today, and you would like to participate in the Q&A, please be sure to put your questions and comments in the chat box. We have somebody monitoring that, and that they can then ask your question here in person. Today, our schedule is going to be really great. We've got a presentation by Bart Scala on managing risk, and that's going to be a really great and helpful thing for anyone who's building a business. After that, we have our Builders series, where we interview a featured founder. And today, that's my good friend James Jensen from Jump. He's one of the founders of The Void, if any of you have done that, and he's worked with Disney and Pixar, a wide variety of other companies, and they'll share an introduction of him later. And then we'll wrap up with a teaser, which will tell you a little bit about what we're going to do in February. So with that, let's welcome Bart Scala to the stage.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope your new year is off to a good start. Hope your resolutions are still intact on this 6 days in. You know what they say about resolutions? In one year, out the other. Thank you. That'll be the end of my attempt at humor. Our topic is a pretty serious one, managing risk, and we'll get started with some definitions that include danger and death and injury and other undesirable outcomes in a general sense. In a business sense, hopefully we're not quite so dangerous, but that can happen even in business. So generally in business, we're talking about a degree of uncertainty or the chance of something happening that we don't want to, mostly losing money, whether it's an investor or if you're a founder, an entrepreneur, you don't want your own company to go under, to lose money. So those are the types of risks that we're talking about. There are lots and lots of business risks. Years ago, I was an economist with Texas Instruments in Dallas, and we would study other countries. We'd look at country risks, so the top one on the right there. And we'd look at all of these other factors and write reports to senior management, and they would take that information and decide where to build their next billion-dollar fab or fabrication center that would manufacture semiconductor chips. And so lots of risk analysis went into that. So that was an interesting experience for me and some early exposure to risk analysis. So fill in the blank. The job of blank is to manage and reduce the risks inherent in any ventures. Anybody? Everyone? Okay. Yeah, you jumped ahead of me a little bit there, Seth. But yeah, I thought you would say an entrepreneur or a founder or a CEO, but it's everyone's risk. And you could even fill in that blank with the job of a mother, the job of a father is to manage and reduce risk for their venture, their family. So yeah, definitely applies to all of us. And if you are an entrepreneur, if you're starting a business, you should know that investors don't look for risk-free investments. That's called a money market or cash or under your mattress or whatever. The job of an entrepreneur is to manage that risk and turn that risk into a profitable, a valuable venture. Love this quote by Mike Moses. He's space missions and safety president for Virgin Galactic, and talk about business risk of danger and death and injury. His job was to get a billionaire into space, and that's who? Not Bezos. Who's Virgin? Branson. Yeah, Richard Branson. So he said there's always risk. It's how you manage that risk that makes the difference. You can do risky things if you know what the risks are and you have controls in place to manage those risks. So love that. And I think it definitely applies to a business venture or any other kind of a venture that we might be engaged in. So lots of tools to analyze and manage risk. We're all familiar with now I can't even think of the name, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. That's really usually thought of as a strategic tool, but it's really a risk analysis tool to look at internal strengths and weaknesses, external opportunities and threats, and kind of systematically go through and determine how you can marshal resources and manage risk. Porter's 5-factor analysis is another good tool. And that factor on the right there, power of suppliers, is especially predominant now where we have supply chain issues. And that's a risk or a threat to your business if you can't get the raw materials that you need. Or if there's a so-called great resignation and you can't get the people that you need for your business. So that's a way to look at risk. Here's another tool. This is a Venn diagram. And if yours is anything like mine, then maybe you shouldn't be an entrepreneur, right? And that's perfectly fine, because somewhere between 95 and 99.9% of the population should not be an entrepreneur. It's definitely not for everyone. But if you can find a way to combine what you are good at, what you like to do, and something that actually makes money, then maybe you could be a successful entrepreneur. But this is a way of analyzing that risk. Here's RevRoad's Venn diagram that we came up with early on, and we even factored in some risk management to this in and of itself, thinking, okay, if RevRoad doesn't succeed, we can go into the business of alliteration. But if you can kind of think through, what are your resources? What is available out there? What's the opportunity? What's a geography? What's a space? What's a problem to solve? These are tools for analyzing and managing risk. Okay, we're going to look at a case study, actually 2 case studies. Number 1 is JourneyFront. Good friend Daniel Ash is here. Daniel, come on up. I'm going to pass the mic to you momentarily. I'll just pass the mic. Less risk that way. Here's kind of a generic revenue chart over the last few years. And I think I joined your board in about 2018 when we brought JourneyFront on, and we did a safe investment and something Joel talked about last time. Very risky. But you can see from this chart that Daniel is very good at managing, identifying, reducing risk. That's what I see in a chart like this. So they just had a capital raise that was closed when mid-quarter, last quarter, fourth quarter, and you're about to make a public announcement on that, so we won't make any specifics. Suffice it to say, JourneyFront is now RevRoad's most valuable portfolio company overall in terms of total market cap. Good job. So Daniel, take it from there.
Thank you, Bart. So can I see the clicker? I confess, I love this topic. I also hate this topic. Who loves risk? But I have been thinking about risk nonstop for the last 5 years, whether I like it or not. And for those who've started companies, you can identify. I've thought about it in the shower, when I'm mowing the lawn, when I'm driving to work, when I'm at the gym, probably more often than I should have when I was on vacation. When you found a company, you can't help but always be obsessing over the risks of your business because they stare you in the face daily, right? And anyway, so this is an important topic. I'm passionate about it. I'm honored to be here and share just a few thoughts. I feel like we could talk about this for hours. I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes and share a couple things that were top of mind. Before I dive in, I wanted to get a feel for the audience. How many people here are currently working at a company? Okay. How many people are founders? How many people are working at a company with less than 3 employees? How many 3 to 15 employees? How many 15 to 50 employees? 50 plus? Okay. All right. So vast majority are under 50, under 30 even, under 20. So a lot of people working at startups or at least small businesses. So you will know this topic really well. The couple of the principles and tips and even stats I wanted to share today are just from my and the JourneyFront team's experience managing risk over time. The first is kind of a fundamental principle, which is when you start a company, you want to really make sure that you're solving a problem that actually matters. I assure you it will not be a fun experience if you are solving a problem that doesn't matter. Now, it doesn't have to matter to everyone, but it has to at least matter sufficiently to some people or a lot to everyone. Or I should say a little to everyone or a lot to some people, right? But I think this is the first thing that I wanted to emphasize because one of the things we had going well for us at JourneyFront, I believe, was we knew, so we're a hiring software and we are looking to fix hiring. We believe hiring's broken, and when a person ends up in a role they don't fit, that causes that person a significant amount of pain. And the company also suffers a lot. A lot of business owners will say the worst experiences they've ever had came from bad hires, whether it was lawsuits or just big, massive failures or turnover or whatever, right? So we knew we were, at least despite not being perfect and having a lot of things wrong at the beginning, we at least knew we were solving a problem and that mattered. And when you're solving a problem that matters, it gives you time to figure it out and to iterate and to pivot. There's many ways to go from A to B, and many ways to attack the problem, many different solutions. But if that is not in place, if you're not solving a problem that matters, there's not any way to iterate yourself out of that, right? So that's the first thing you want to do. And you want to be careful when you're talking to people. There's a great book I've mentioned multiple times called The Mom Test. What to do when everyone you're talking to is lying to you, like your mom would when you say, "Mom, here's my business idea," and she says, "That's great," right? But it's your mom, right? And so at the beginning when you're starting a company, you really have to talk to the people who are experiencing that problem, even maybe before you mention your idea, and validate that it's actually a problem, because it will save you a lot of pain and heartache later if it's not. So that's the first point. The earlier you are in your business, the more likely you are wrong about something, guaranteed. Probably lots of things. I was probably wrong about 1,000 things when we started Journeyfront. It's just inevitable. And every one of those things that are wrong, some of them aren't necessarily going to kill you. Some of them don't represent risk, but many of them do. Many of the assumptions you have going in, that this is a problem, or that this is what customers think about this problem, or that this is the right way to solve that problem. Those are significant risks that will kill your business, and you're probably wrong about something. Some aspect of the problem, some aspect of how you're tackling that problem, your solution, but you're wrong about something. And I assure you, I know this really first and foremost, firsthand. You know, in the early days of Journeyfront, when we started, we were really optimistic, and you know, you always look back and think, "Oh, wow, I was more naive than I realized." There was a company that about a couple years before had started a company similar, trying to solve the same problem. And of course, they came and they made some rounds here in the Valley, and then they failed after a couple years. And we wanted to talk to that person, right, to manage risk, to figure out why they failed. And we explained what we were doing, the problem we were solving, and how we were tackling it. And he looked me in the eye, and he said, "If you continue down this path, you will fail." That's a scary thing to hear as an entrepreneur, right? In 2019, we were lucky enough to make it to the final round of Silicon Slopes, which means us and a few other RevRoad portfolios made it on stage, got a pitch to Eric, CEO of Podium, and Josh James, and a few other people. And I remember in the Q&A, Josh James looked at me after I was done with my 5 to 10 minute pitch. There's probably, I don't know, a couple thousand people in the audience. And he said, "Nobel Prize winners have failed at this. What makes you smarter than them?" Quite a question to get on stage, right? I do not think I'm smarter than Nobel Prize winners, to be clear. There's different ways to handle this. You will probably experience stories like this, hopefully not as dramatic and not as public, but you'll experience this from people. The wrong way is to take what they say and say, "All right, I'm done. I'm going to give up." That's the wrong way. Also, the wrong way is to say, they're right, or excuse me, they're wrong. I'm going to keep going, because what do they know, right? Those are both the wrong ways to do it. The right way is to find truth in what they're saying, and we'll talk about that here in a second. An interesting stat when it comes to figuring out what you're wrong about in the early days. This was done by an accelerator of Samsung Ventures. They called it the Open Innovation Center a couple years. They looked at all their portfolios over many years, and they found that the average successful startup pivoted 7 times before its Series A. 7 times before just its Series A. I mean, usually the pivots happen less often over time because hopefully you figured it out. But 7 times. So if you're an early startup founder and you have not pivoted, probability-wise, you are likely wrong. If you've not pivoted at least once or twice or 3 times, there's a good chance that you still have some more pivots to go. I went and looked back, and Journeyfront pivoted to get to product market fit at least 4 times. And you could also argue that we had at least 3, if not 4, go-to-market pivots, where we wasn't about the product and how we were solving, but how we were messaging. We had to pivot how we were messaging. So our number is at least 8, probably, right? So you're going to have to pivot along the way, and you don't want to get stuck in your ways and just double down. Grit is a part of the process, but that's one of the things an entrepreneur has to be really good at, is like managing your confidence, your emotional sanity, your belief, while taking a step back and not having that founder bias and believing so strongly that you avoid all the signs around you of you being on the wrong track. So the main thing I would recommend is know the assumptions in your business that, if wrong, will kill you. Every business has some. Identify your rats. It's an acronym used by a lot in the startup ecosystem, risky assumption tests. There are assumptions that if wrong will kill your business, and there's ways to validate those assumptions, right? When we sold our first customer, we hadn't even built the product, but I was talking to customers and learning how to sell, and I kept hearing people say, yeah, this is great. But I didn't have anything to sell, but I had to know. The riskiest assumption was people will not buy this. So I said, will you buy this? And they said, yes. Many would say yes. And I said, all right, great. How much? Like, will you write a check right now? And they're like, well, it's not ready. I'm like, well, yeah, when it's ready, will you write a check right now so that when it's ready, you'll buy it? And this was a small company, and they said, well, we're a small business. Once you ask for a check, the truth starts coming out. And I said, all right, $10 a month. Will you write a check for $10 a month? And they said yes. They churned a year in, but that allowed us to learn in the meantime. They weren't a target customer. They were a 10-person company, but that's the type of ways you have to validate these assumptions. When we were pretty far along in 2018, things just weren't, we had some churn, like we weren't, it was really hard to see success with companies. And we actually made a list in our office, in our small office, there's 4 of us on the team, of all the assumptions of our business, and those that we had validated and those that we had not yet validated. And there were a lot that were not yet validated. And furthermore, there were a lot that our product, if those are true, our product would not solve that problem or would not be successful in the market. And we rebuilt the entire software in 2018. And the analogy I used with our team was it literally, and I was selling an old clunky product that was no longer getting supported, fixing bugs and stuff, while I stalled for our team to build the entire new code base, everything. And it felt like we were in a leaking boat and building the new boat, and we stepped off onto the new boat right as the other boat went down. That's literally what it felt like, which is very much risk. But that was the right call for the business, and it's that move that made us not only survive, but eventually thrive. If we had not done that, we would also be looking another entrepreneur in the face and say, if you continue down this path, you will fail. So everyone should be doing that. And the last principle is listen. This is a word, as an extrovert, I don't think I was as passionate about this word in the early years of my life. I'm now so passionate about the word listen. Listen with your eyes and with your ears, which is to say, listen to what people are telling you, customers, advisors, former entrepreneurs, and observe as well what people are telling you, the truths that are there, regardless of your emotional and stressed reaction to what they're saying. Listen to customers, industry experts, those who've come before, in that order. And come before, I mean, recent former entrepreneurs, things like that. The entrepreneur that said, if you continue down this path, you will fail, right? We listened. Tell us about your story. What happened? He says, we never got our hiring software to be essential. It was like an assessment that people would try, right? They would try this assessment, but they never got that product to be essential for companies. And so companies would use it, but then they're like, well, why are we still using this little assessment that candidates take when, our hiring managers don't use it? Let's just keep using our own product. They never made it essential. And so we looked at that and we listened and we said, we have to make JourneyFront essential, or JourneyFront will not be a product companies continue to use. And so we took a step back, we saw why they failed, and we said, all right, what's more important than a dinky little assessment on the side? A company's whole hiring process. So it said, we got to span the product to the whole hiring process and all the insights a company finds essential to making hiring decisions. And that led to a product change. Josh James, when he said Nobel Prize winners have failed at this, what makes you smarter than them? We said we are not smarter than them. So what was it about Nobel Prize winners that caused them to fail? And we said they tried to make one assessment that all companies would use that would lead to perfect hiring accuracy. And the reality is there's not one perfect hiring process because every company, every job's different. So that led us to customizability in the product to where you can measure whatever you want, right? And so we have unique formulas at the company level, not one assessment to rule them all, because Nobel Prize winners went down that path for 20 years and failed. Why do I want to go down that path for 20 years and failed? Another thing we saw is there's a lot of cynicism around hiring. Everyone, because by the time you're age 2, you start judging the world and people around you. Social media has taught us that having opinions is very easy today. Doesn't take much brain power. So we learned that cynicism of like any outside tool, we can flip that and use that not as a risk that will cause us to die, but as an advantage, because if there's cynicism, that means nobody has a clue what's going on with hiring. And if we can be the solution that actually tells you what's working and what's not working, we can use that cynicism and actually make it not a risk, but an advantage for us. So that led to a change in how we were selling our product and us tracking data on hiring data and analyzing against hiring outcomes, performance, retention, so that companies know what to tweak in their hiring process to get better. So those are examples of how we use those stories. We listened, and then we used it to change how we sold the product or how we built the product. The last quote I wanted to just leave on is, your first 200 complaints that you will hear as an entrepreneur are more important than your last 2,000 compliments. It is what you do with those first 200 complaints that will determine if you even make it to the last 2,000 compliments. So you want to get out there in the market as quick as you can and hear those complaints and listen both with your eyes and ears to what they were and evaluate how we can adjust how we're going about things, what we're building, how we're selling, the messaging, to accommodate what those complaints are, because every one of those is a potential risk that could cause you to die as a company and not succeed with customers. So that's all. I'm going to stay after for any Q&A, but I wanted to leave a couple thoughts. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Daniel. Stay up here for just a minute. I'm going to ask you a question right now, and then they can ask you more later. So Daniel's absolutely right. He listens to his employees, his customers, his board even, and that's yielded remarkable results. You've overcome a lot of risk early stage. You're still early stage in the grand scheme of things. In getting an offer and eventually taking that offer to raise over $10 million at a nice valuation, which I won't I won't spoil what the valuation was, but you went to your board and you said, hey, there are risks and rewards of taking this or of not taking this. Talk just for a minute about what those risks and rewards were that you saw, mainly the risks.
With raising around that big? Yeah, so no surprise here. When people give you money, they're going to want you to give that money back eventually with a lot more money on top of it, right? So the larger the round you raise, the more they are going to expect you, the larger they're going to expect you to reach in terms of your valuation as a company before you exit. So if you're comfortable with like a $10 million exit, which is life-changing for all of us, don't raise $10 million because they won't let you do that, right? So one of the risks was we knew, all right, this is signing us up for several years, and we're not just going to be able to turn this around and sell it in 6 months. And so we had to really be okay with the fact that we want to do this. Like, we want to solve this problem. It's a big problem in a big way. We want to go for it. So that was kind of one of the reasons. Another, though, that's on the opposite side that's actually good for an entrepreneur is one of the main reasons startups fail is no market. You're not solving a problem that matters, right? You never get to product market fit because there's never a market for the product because it's not solving a problem that matters. But another is that they run out of money, right? It's like in the top 5 common reasons companies fail, probably 2 or 3, I'm guessing, is that you run out of money. And so raising a larger amount does give you time to actually, fight another day and actually a couple years, and gives you more time to, like, to the analogy of, building a company is like jumping off a cliff and trying to build a plane on your way down, right? It gives you more time before you hit the ground, and it gives you more resources to build the plane, right? So as long as we're okay with the risks of the expectations and us potentially spending it too fast, which, if you're disciplined, you're in control of, we ultimately were fine with that risk for the upside.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll have more time with Daniel in Q&A. I'm just going to run through a couple more slides here on our topic. Another tool to look at risk management. We're just going to focus on this one in the upper right, risk mitigation. 4 principles here of risk mitigation. You can accept the risk, you can try to avoid it, you can transfer it to someone else, or you can reduce it in a number of different ways. So risk acceptance, here's an example. This is a chart that shows early stage, operator error here. And there we go. Okay, so this is a chart that shows early stage startup valuations, and they skyrocketed last year in 2021 after being somewhat consistent. The green bar is an average. The median is the blue bar. And if you remember your high school statistics, that means in the green bar for 2021, there were some outliers. That really most everything was staying somewhat consistent, rising a little bit, a healthy amount, but it wasn't skyrocketing. So a risk here is if you're a startup and you hear that people are getting 5x valuation, 5x on revenue, 5x what they used to be worth, whatever that 5x metric is, and you're not getting that, the risk is you'll think, well, what's wrong with me? And the answer is nothing. There were just a couple of outliers, and that's skewing the data. The risk for a startup like JourneyFront is one that I don't think you really touched upon, Daniel, but I'll just mention it here. If you take a high valuation, that sets certain expectations, and if you need to raise again, you'd better be raising at an even higher valuation next time. The kiss of death for a startup is called a down round. That can lead to a death spiral, and you want to avoid that. So that's a risk. Obviously, a risk to an investor here is as startup valuations, early stage valuations, which RevRoad primarily deals with, as those continue to go up, an investor has to pay a higher and higher price to get in, and that's an investment risk. Here are some other investment risks. You have the standard risk-reward trade-off, and if you can reduce risk while maintaining return or increase returns for the same amount of risk, saying the same thing, then you've got something, and you're probably going to be rich and famous. Look at this normal bell curve, this distribution curve. As you go to the right on risk, notice there's, generally speaking, and this phenomenon, a bell curve, occurs in so many different things in life, and it's true in startups as well. As you go to the right, you're taking on more and more risk. You haven't reached an inflection point yet, and the returns aren't being manifest. But eventually those kick in, and that's what a business is. You're getting returns for a certain amount of risk. At some point, those returns might cap in a percentage basis. A software company can get 50, 60, 70, 80% margin, profit margin, and that's a great business. But if they try to go beyond that, like at the top of the curve there, say Apple, not necessarily a software company, but somewhat, or Microsoft, or whatever company with a huge return wants even higher margins, and they take their earnings in a year and go to Vegas or buy a lottery ticket, chances are you're going to see diminishing returns for increased risk, but not increased return. So there is a theoretical limit there. This is, speaking of Nobel Prize winners, in economics, people have won Nobel Prizes for this curve, showing that it's a bit of an eye test, but on the bottom left, if you have a portfolio 100% invested in bonds, and on the top right, 100% invested in stocks, the common thought used to be was, well, there's a normal kind of risk-return trade-off here. And people named French and Fama and some others won Nobel Prizes showing through portfolio theory and diversification, you can reduce risk while increasing returns. Now, if you're a startup and you make this argument that, hey, investor, invest in my startup and it will reduce your overall risk in your portfolio while enhancing your returns, good luck with that argument. This is more portfolio theory, but the principle is still interesting there, that you can go from the bottom left, relatively safe investment portfolio, add an asset that is more risky, and you actually reduce the overall risk. So I find that concept fascinating. Or look at the top right. You can reduce your risk, give up a little bit of return, but go way down on the scale of risk. And that's a good trade-off. So risk avoidance is our next one. Here's an example, accredited investors. If you are a startup, you need to avoid anyone who is not accredited. What's an accredited investor? Here's the definition. It goes back to the Securities Act of 1933. It's meant to protect small, unsophisticated investors, and the SEC just said, we don't know exactly what that means, but we're just going to define it based in, last updated in 1982, based on financial numbers. If you make $200,000 a year, or if you're married, you have to make $300,000 a year for the last 2 years, you're accredited. And the SEC says, if you make that much, you must be able to withstand and bear the risk of a private equity investment. Or if you have $1 million net worth, not including your home, you're accredited. And think in terms of 1992, we had double-digit inflation. Interest rates were 20% and above. And in essence, since the SEC hasn't changed the definition financially in that time period, they've kind of let more and more people participate there. But that's still the benchmark. You can also participate in private equity deals if you're part of the company. They figure you have the information to know whether that's too risky for yourself or not. The SEC did expand the definition just about a year ago to include certain certifications, professional designations like a CPA or a lawyer that maybe doesn't meet the financial test, but meets other tests. You, as a founder raising capital, will never have to do an audit of anyone that signs up to invest. Your investment documents, whether it's a SAFE or a securities purchase agreement, whatever it is, it'll have a statement in there in bold letters that says, this is not registered under the Securities Act of 1933. And basically what that means is, and then there's other language to define and say, yeah, I'm signing up that I'm an accredited investor. You don't have to check their financial statements or do an audit on their taxes. If they sign up saying that they are accredited, that will generally be good enough. But if the SEC ever finds out that you signed up your grandmother, who can barely afford to feed her cats, let alone herself, you could have some issues. So you can avoid risk by complying with and understanding that securities regulation. You can transfer risk through insurance is the most common way, various types of insurance out there. You can also disclose, which is a risk transference method. I'll give you a quick example here. RevRoad has risk disclosures that we've had in place since 2017. Here's just a few of them. Look at that last one. In 2017, we disclosed to our investors that an investment in RevRoad could be at risk of loss because of tariffs, political instability, terrorism, and pandemic, having no idea that we would nail all 4 of those. Think of the implications on this January 6th deadline of domestic terrorism and political instability and what that could do to the free enterprise system. So that's a way of transferring risk. Great quote there. We don't have time to read. We're going to take a look at a quick additional case study.
Now to Colorado, and wildfires that destroyed as many as 1,000 homes and forced tens of thousands to evacuate. Satellite images show a housing development in the town of Superior. More than 100 homes were reduced to ash. Marissa Armas from our CBS Denver station KCNC is on the scene in Louisville, Colorado.
A combination of hurricane-force winds and wildfires left a trail of devastation across parts of Boulder County, Colorado. Wind gusts of more than 100 miles per hour fueled the flames, destroying everything in its path, including nearly 1,000 homes.
There's ashes in the sky and fire in the ground. So pretty scary.
Okay, so that just happened last week, and usually when you're talking wildfires, you're talking about out in the forest and a stray cabin or two might get burned to the ground. In this case, over 1,000 homes in a residential community were destroyed, and they had defensible space around them. They had, streets and swimming pools and all kinds of other things. Something happened that had never happened before with these winds, and it made it so that your defensible space had to be that you were far enough away from another home that you would avoid the wildfire. So new risks can crop up at any time. Last thought, It's great for a startup. It's great for any business, as Warren Buffett will teach, to have a moat, a defensible space around your business that you can defend yourself from risks of all types. And that's that can mean so many different things. And hopefully it doesn't mean that, like in Colorado now or other places, we have to redefine what wildfire risk means and probably have even greater social distancing than we've had in the past. Great quote by James Baldwin: "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." So face your fears, face your risks, and manage them systematically. There's a way to do that. And you'll be successful as an entrepreneur, as an individual, if you can do that. So the job of us all is to manage and reduce risks. And do we have time for any Q&A? No time for Q&A. Braden, I think you're next.
All right, those guys are great. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much, Bart. You can see why I appreciate and love these men. They are wonderful leaders and have done great things in their lives. I hope you take from this something actionable that you can consider in your business today. And with that, we're going to go ahead and now welcome Braden Cutler, who is in our business development team, to the stage. He will be interviewing our guest speaker, our guest today, and also introducing him.
Thanks, everyone. Let me turn this on real quick. Okay, testing, works. All right. Let me put that in my, I'm going to set that down for a minute. So I have the pleasure of introducing James Jensen today. And first off, I want to thank everybody for being here. So James Jensen is an entrepreneur. He's committed to working with leading-edge technology, and he's eager to solve problems surrounding how we interact and engage with each other in physical and virtual worlds. He's the previous creator and co-founder of the world-renowned virtual reality company, The Void. Many of you have probably been or experienced The Void. How many of you guys have actually been to The Void or been through it? Okay, pretty amazing experience. Within the last 25 years, James founded and managed several technology companies in video streaming, social networks, mobile games, and creative services. He's partnered with Disney, Sony, Fox, MGM, Intel, Microsoft, Sci-Fi, DreamWorks, MTV, through many of the ventures he's worked on. And he's now launching a new form of virtual reality that they were referring to as hyper reality, in the form of a multi-sensory entertainment company called Jump. And Jump will allow people to come as close to jumping and flying as the real thing, but without all the risk. So without further ado, we'll invite James to the stage. So thank you so much for being here. Can we get a round of applause? So,
thanks for having me.
yeah, for sure. We're very grateful you're here.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to do is just have you tell us a little bit about Jump. I know we have a little video we wanted to show, but why don't you give us a little brief synopsis on Jump, and then we'll show the video.
Absolutely. Jump is multifaceted, but to boil it down, I like to tell people or ask people if they've ever had a dream of flying. And most people are like, absolutely, I always have dreams of flying. And then they tell me this awesome dream that they've had. And so like as a base, that was one of the motivations, one of the core motivations of what Jump is when I created The Void, I recognized something that was happening inside of the experience because I did The Void mostly because it was an entertainment concept. I came from movie making and computer animation and visual effects, and I saw people on green screens that were being composited into these imaginated worlds that were so cool and so awesome. I was like, I want to be inside the computer. And I did the Void for entertainment base, but a byproduct of what happened with the Void is what really fascinated me, and it was this experience that people were having when they went into a virtual reality simulation that felt very real to them. When they came out, they kind of questioned their reality after that. They were open to new possibilities. We always had this saying that adults went in one side and kids came out the other side. Like I would see Paul Allen and like Larry Page and these guys on one side, adults with like bodyguards, and on the other side there were 16, 17-year-old kids, and their minds were open again. I was like, wow, that's something that I didn't expect. One of my favorite things was to walk or to go to my locations and sit at the exits and watch people come out and see the reactions. It was really fun.
Love that.
Yeah. So jump is a hyper realistic wingsuit and base jumping experience that people can experience these crazy things that these guys do that train for many years and risk their lives to jump and fly these amazing places in the world. And we've basically made a replica of that in a virtual sense for people, anybody to experience.
That's truly incredible. In fact, do you mind? We're going to take a pause and can we cue the video? We'll give everybody an opportunity to kind of experience in a 2D way.
Yeah, this video is really fun.
Jump.
It's at the end of it's one of our investors that he comes out of it and you can see his reaction. This is the prototype that we built out in Pennsylvania in 2020.
Perfect.
If you could jump off a cliff with zero risk, would you do it? Yeah, me too. Introducing Jump, the world's first wingsuit simulator. This hyper-real experience gives you the thrill of flying with no prior experience and zero risk. Developed and tested with professional wingsuit jumpers, you will feel as if you are actually flying. As a pre-launch exclusive, we are offering a limited number of discounted jump packages on our website. Click the link above or below and come join the Jump Squad.
Well, that was a different video, but that one's also good.
If you could jump off a cliff with zero risk, would you?
Watch it again.
We'll watch it twice. It was that
Yeah.
good. Okay, well, first question actually I want to ask, kind of following up to that. You mentioned already in your previous comment that kind of what you're seeing people, like the, how do I say this, like the repercussions of people coming through, like your increase in creativity, they go in adults, they come out kids. What other things are you seeing as they go through this hyper-reality experience? Like what else are they experiencing?
You know, I really liked what we were talking about, or what was being mentioned in the last, talk about risks and things like that. And I'm always thinking about why would a person want to do this. And one of the things that I identified with the hyper reality simulations that we were creating is something was going on, right? Something inside of the experience was happening. And through the benefits that I've gotten on being an entrepreneur and getting to meet really fascinating people, including neuroscientists and psychologists, we started spinning on like what's happening inside of the void experience. Like, why is this a thing? And you guys can look up like VR fails, and you'll find lots of videos of people running into the wall or jumping through their televisions. And it's funny, but if you actually look at what's going on in those experiences, they are seeing something that looks completely artificial. If you know what Archie's plank is, like the thing looks like a total video game, not real, but yet a person will put on a VR headset and within a few seconds believe that they can not only fly or that they'll be safe when they fly, they'll jump through their television. And if you put that into perspective, is if I invited any of you to come up on the stage, I'm like, I'll give you $500 to put your hands behind your back and fall onto your face. I don't think you could do it. Like, I don't think, like, physically you would allow yourself to do it. And so something really interesting happens in a virtual reality, or not even virtual reality, but when you implement physical senses that allows your body to get into what I call, and what others have called, like a flow state, in a dream state where you're hyper present. And I think that's what we have defined as with Jump is, if you have somebody in a hyper present state, in flow state, that's when you do the best work. That's when you are at the highest performing, maximum potential of your effort, is when you're in flow state. And so if you can teach an individual in flow state, like that would be unbelievable.
That's amazing. I've actually totally experienced the VR. I think I almost broke my cousin's VR set because we were doing the boxing game, and I ended up punching the wall. So, but
Yep.
Really interesting. The next question, kind of leading into that, is obviously you are very heavily focused on the user experience. I mean, it seems like that's your main focus, is you want to help people really jump out of their current reality and jump into something they may never experience. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever, my wife just gave birth, so I don't know if I'm ever going to go actually jump in a real squirrel suit. But in this question, I just want to say, so the magic in your customer experience comes when the customer believes what they're experiencing. What advice would you have for other businesses about customer experience? Like, what advice would you give about focusing on that experience for customers? And obviously, different businesses focus on different, segments. But
I think that's dependent on the type of business, but overall, we try to focus on, sometimes people say your experience, your business starts when they get your product, or it starts when they walk through the front door. And my perception is it doesn't start there. It starts when they first see the first thing that they ever do on your product. Their experience should start at the moment that a person opens their mouth and talks about what you're doing or what your product is. And that's when their experience starts. And then once they go through the whole process, if you've been able to curate a flow for them to progress through that, whatever your product is, I think you'd be a lot more successful. And that's, considering all kinds of variables that the person could be going through and how your messaging is and how one step kind of dovetails right into the next step. With hyper reality simulations and what we're doing with Jump, we're considering not only like the customer journey as it typically is defined, but also like potentially psychological triggers within the experience that would amplify the result.
That's amazing. What other kind of pivots have you made in the user journey as you've kind of experienced and put people through the hyper reality experience?
I think pivoting and mitigating risk is like what they were talking about before is you have assumptions, and you need to make sure that you validate those assumptions with data as soon as possible. Like write them out, and then as soon as you possibly can, validate those assumptions with data. And we did early on testing with our ticketing. And we validated some things. For instance, most virtual reality things that are location-based is like, hey, here's $20 and sit in this little chair thing that does circles, and you'll go on a roller coaster ride, right? Jump is taking quite a few steps out of, hey, virtual reality is for video games and techies and nerds that have extra money to buy a VR headset to fight zombies, to no, Jump is actually potentially the new version of I don't know how to say it, but like experiential learning almost inside of a belief system. So we've done some things to kind of validate that, and we'll continue to do that. And we were still pivoting. I think you just keep pivoting, especially with your messaging. You have to just continually pivot and change your messaging. But we're trying to validate. To resolve that, we're trying to validate our pricing. To do this in reality costs thousands of dollars. You have to buy your own equipment. At the end of the day, you have to throw yourself off of a cliff, and hopefully you survive. Like there's the death barrier. So we think that the value that we're providing is a lot higher than anything else. And so we're charging more for our tickets. We're charging a bit more that's comparable to other physical experiences like even jumping out of an airplane or going on a zip line or jumping off the stratosphere in Las Vegas. It's comparable to those in the market, but we are pushing the envelope on what people will pay for a virtual reality experience.
I asked you at the beginning, actually, you said you have a friend who's a professional, does professional squirrel jump. Has he actually been through the machine and actually tried it?
Yeah, he has.
What was his response? I
have an awesome video of him actually going through the experience. It was very critical for me in this whole process to make sure that we had a completely authentic experience. And my friend Marshall Miller, he's Utah local guy. He's a professional wingsuit jumper, base jumper. He's done over 10,000 jumps, and I took him out. And it was funny when I had him go through the experience because when he went through it, we didn't have the parachute mechanic done yet, so you couldn't actually pull your parachute. And I told him over and over, I'm like, you are going to crash because first you're using my wingsuit settings, which are based on physics, and I've never wingsuit jumped in my life, and so I don't know if it actually functions correctly. And then you can't pull your parachute. So you're going to go through the ground. It's okay. It's just virtual. But what was interesting is he jumped off, and he was flying for a few seconds, and he believed he was really flying. And when he didn't hit anything. He went through the surface mesh of the virtual world. He called it going in, and he's like, I always wondered what it would be like to go in, which means you hit the cliff and you don't wake up anymore. And he's like, now I know. And he like, he curled and he said a few choice words. And I thought I scarred him for life, but he came out of it fine. And those guys are amazing. Like, what they do is incredible, and it's extremely dangerous. And I couldn't really understand why you would wingsuit jump more than once. Like, if that was on my bucket list, and I'm like, I'm gonna go do that. And I figure out how to do it, and I get my wingsuit, and I prepare, and I go the 10 years it takes to actually survive and do something like this. When you jump off, and if I survived, like, wouldn't I just check that box and just kind of be done with it? I'm like, I have 5 kids. I'm looking forward to being a grandpa. Like, why would you jump 10,000 times? He has kids. He has a wife. He kisses them every time he goes out to jump. I'm like, why would you do this? It wasn't until I first jumped and I flew and I had control and I pulled my parachute and my feet landed down that I realized why you would want to risk your life to do that over and over. It was really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we have Marshall Miller on, and then also Hartman Richter is on, and they're both professional wingsuit jumpers. Hartman is really unique because he's actually a really good programmer, so he's writing all the physics for the wingsuit, and they're telling us that we're 75 to 80% of the way there, and there's a path for us to get almost 100% there.
That is truly incredible. And how did you meet all these guys? Is this just part of your career? Or?
It's part of my career, and as an entrepreneur, and I talk about this a lot, I don't burn bridges with people. And my dad told me really early on when I started airbrushing when I was 12 and I started charging for t-shirts and things, he said, the one thing, James, he said, your reputation will be worth way more to you than any money you'll ever make. And so I always kind of like had that as my mantra or whatever. And so I don't burn bridges. You never know the person that you're working with or the person that you're introduced with, if they'll be able to help you in the future. And it's just always good to have that. And so that's probably the thing that I hold like near and dear is my reputation. And that's why people will trust what I'm doing and be excited about it and building those teams. And so over the years of creating video games and virtual reality stuff and programming, all these, and Marshall and understanding him and his group, like they just kind of collectively come together at a time where I have this crazy idea. I think we should build a hyper reality simulation where we base jump off of stuff. Those relationships kind of come to the table if you've been able to maintain those over several years.
Beautiful. What and I'm assuming they all kind of have this shared vision, but what is your vision for Jump over the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
Which one do you want? Because it goes all the way out to 20.
Yeah, let's start with the next year. Like, what do you see in the next year, and let's go to 5 years.
You'll see an evolution of Jump, and I won't dig into it too far. But the surface, there's lots of levels and depth to what Jump could potentially be. And the surface level is wingsuit-based jumping, X Games. Yeah, it's really cool, and I've always wanted to fly, and that's very surface level. And we start pulling back the layers of that. You start looking at things like what separates an individual from being a high performer, and a lot of that is the fear barrier, a fear of actually creating a business and starting something, the fear of failing. That's what separates high performers from average people. And so if you look at what Jump could potentially be, and our hypothesis is if you had experiences where you were faced with a fear barrier and you were able to jump past that and see success, that you'd be able to correlate that to other things and be able to overcome that. So as far as my vision goes, I think we are seeing in technology a belief system, a new education system. It will train people at a very deep level instead of just text and watching things on screens. And I like to put it this way, and nobody has disagreed with me yet. If I say you are the equivalent of all the experiences you've had to date, people are like, yeah, probably that's very true. Like everything that good or bad that's happened to me has created who I am today. So the idea is, what if you had the ability to curate an experience when you were younger that gave you a different perspective? Like, who would James Jensen be now at 46 if I would have had more knowledge of an experience that I had when I was younger? And I think that's the biggest opportunity with what Jump could potentially represent in the market, is a huge shift.
Really cool. I'm going to jump back to something you just mentioned. about just some of the key like barriers. We talked about barriers, like mitigating barriers. What other barriers have you found throughout the process of building the Void and also building Jump? Like, what are some of the big barriers you've had to jump over as an entrepreneur? How'd you mitigate those?
I mean, specifically with virtual reality, and it's probably with a lot of different things, is this, there's a lot of noise in the market when it comes to products and differentiating yourself from things. Most people are like, hey, do you want to go do this VR thing? Like, I have this cardboard thing I put my cell phone in, and I'm not into VR, right? It's like, and some of the funny things is some of these events are like, I'm like, hey, I have this VR wingsuit thing, and I would love to be part of your event and stuff. Like, oh, that's great. Could you like set it up in the corner and show it off? I'm like, no, it's like 17,000 pounds and it's bolted to the ground. I'm not bringing it. So it's differentiating yourself. I think it's hard with messaging and trying to make sure that your messaging is created in a way that allows a person to understand what it is that they're going to be purchasing or buying, and how it differentiates. It's really tough, especially when there's a lot of noise like that.
Thank you. This is kind of a random question, but I'm sure you get to hear all kinds of funny experiences about like weird things happening at the Void when people are going through and having any fun stories from your perspective that I think people would want to hear about.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to VR fails, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We learned a lot in the Void early on, things that you could visually, we didn't think that people would do inside of the experience, or you had to be, we learned very quickly that you had to be careful on what things you put in the simulation that looked like they were sturdy. Because if you got off balance or something, there was like a stack of rocks and you went for those, you would go onto the ground. You go really quick, and that's what kind of fascinates me with some of these VR, location-based VR companies that are doing open world stuff, but there's no physical aspects to it, because a person, like we've seen online, they go very quickly into, oh, this is real. So this wall is obviously real. And if they're scared or in a heightened emotional state, they'll completely believe that it's real, and then they'll just dive onto the ground or go through a wall or try to sit down on something. And one specific experience, we had a NASCAR driver that came out and went through the Void early on, and at the end of the experience, I would stop people, and then I would turn around and turn off the simulation. And I stopped him, and I went to turn around and turn off the simulation, and the developers had made this other area look like there was stairs that went up to an exit or went around the corner. And when I stopped him and I turned around, he saw the stairs and got spooked and ran for the stairs. And there was no stairs in reality. There's just a wall. And he took a whole face full of mask and cut up his nose. He had to like get on TV the next day for an interview. But the funny thing was, he was a good friend, so he didn't like press charges or anything. But he walked into the conference room after, and his wife was there, and he was like, "This was so real. It felt like I really hit my face." He's like bleeding down his face. Yeah, funny story.
That's awesome. Excuse me. Here in a couple minutes, actually, we're going to turn it over to the crowd to let everybody kind of ask. But I have a couple last questions I wanted to ask. So this is one, but if you could go back to the beginning of doing something differently, like go back to the beginning of your business experience, your entrepreneur experience, what would you do differently? Like, what are some of the things that you wish you could change?
I think I wish somebody would have told me that owning a business is a learning experience, and you'll learn a certain version of a business at a certain level, but there's several levels. It's a very different level when your company's worth a couple $1 million versus your company's worth 500 million or even billions of dollars. There's different players that come into the room when that much value is created, and you have something that's amazing and something that people want. There's different personalities that come into that, and so having your company set up correctly in the very beginning, that's one of the things I like about RevRoad, is they really are passionate about allowing their creators to maintain some control, which is very important in executing the vision of a company. that can get kind of tossed to the side when other personalities come in and like, oh, this is an amazing thing, and we don't need these people, and we can manufacture these and make billions of dollars. They justify a lot of things. It's nothing against them. It's just normal business stuff that I found out. But I wish somebody would have told me that that was something that happened. It might have made my learning experience be less painful. But I know now what that's like, and I know how to set up a company early on to make sure that that cap table stays in the structure that needs to, and the contracts and agreements stay in those structures to maintain enough control to be able to see the vision all the way through.
It's amazing. And I guess on top of that, it's very unique because you have a multinational company, right? You're outside of the United States. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs that are looking to branch outside of the United States? And kind of along those same lines, I mean, what tips would you give?
I think that one of the unexpected things, if you've ever watched the movie The Founder, that's a good movie to watch. Because you have a product and it's your baby, and you're like, and you watch people come in and they experience it or they purchase it and they enjoy this thing, and you want to maintain that across the board. But it's very different wherever you go, and it's harder to maintain that when you go internationally even. And so the best results that I've seen is to have a facility or place that you can bring your general managers to and teach them the culture, teach them why they're doing the things that they're doing, and train them in an area where that culture exists, instead of just signing up people. And maintaining that customer experience is probably one of the hardest things you can do when you go, not even internationally. I mean, our second location was in New York. And New Yorkers, they don't treat people like Utah people treat people. It was funny to, and just the people in general, they change. And so where we wanted like really friendly assistance and putting equipment on and taking off equipment with a void, they don't do that as much in other areas. So there's also, when we launched out in Dubai too, there was a lot of things like, a man couldn't, touch a woman or do anything, and a woman, it had to be like same sex to be able to put on equipment, and we had to change some things in the experience because of colors that represent certain things. So being able to be flexible in that, but I think maintaining the customer experience is one of the things that you need to consider when you are going internationally, and what's the best environment to train people in to educate them on the culture and that experience.
Love that. Thank you. We're going to turn it over to the crowd now, to our audience. But what questions do we have? We're going to do some Q&A real quick. So questions, yeah.
Yeah, so Oculus over Christmas break, New Year's, it was the #1 downloaded app on the App Store. And so people are getting to know VR, what VR is, and what the experience is like. But Jump being hyper immersive, it's a completely different experience than Oculus. So are you trying to market that with customer testimonials, or is it just something that is completely different and people will experience, and so you don't try to differentiate Jump with the norm VR?
Yeah, we'll absolutely differentiate ourselves when you start seeing videos of people doing this. You'll see 16, 17-year-old kids that can't even qualify to jump out on an airplane. I think you have to be 18 to sign up to do that post a video of them jumping the Tiananmen Mountains in China in a wingsuit. And it will look completely photorealistic. And their friends are like, what? You went to China and jumped the Tiananmen Mountains? It's like, no, I was in Bluffdale. So differentiating ourselves, I think what you'll see also too with the Jump experience is people's testimonials that pair with those posts. We're hopeful that those are, hey, this was really a life-changing moment. Like, I have always been scared to do something like this, and I had this opportunity. With at-home virtual reality and the way that that's coming about, I think there's huge opportunities there for, it's just a sea of opportunity for digital creation of worlds and being able to educate people on why virtual reality is important. I've always said that one of the reasons why VR hasn't been massively adapted is because it's not very meaningful yet. We need to make a shift. It needs to be meaningful. Like, I have a $1,000 phone that I carry around. Who would have thought I was going to have a $1,000 phone? I have a $1,000 phone because it's meaningful. It helps me. It helps me organize my life or whatever. Once virtual reality turns into something that's meaningful, you'll see mass adoption. If it stays in the video game world and you're fighting zombies, it's not going to be massively adopted. Hopefully I answered your question.
From a marketing standpoint, like Marshall Miller working for GoPro, video is big, and a lot of people will go out and do these high adventure, high risk things so that they can share it, right? So will you be having some sort of video, like you were saying, the 17-year-olds will be sharing it as they jump? Will it just video the whole thing and then somehow import to social media?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
When you jump, since we're inside of a game engine or a world engine, which I think they should lose game engine because it's not that anymore. We have the ability to put cameras everywhere. So we can have drone shots, we can have proximity cameras that turn on as you fly by stuff. Since our experience is completely dynamic and you're flying anywhere you want, all of those look unique. So it's not a predetermined video that they get, it's actually them doing it. And that's one of the things that is really cool about what we're doing with Jump is it's open world dynamic. So it's the equivalent for people that are asking me, do you think people are really going to do this more times than just once? And I said, well, do people buy snowboarding equipment and go to Park City every year and buy pass? That's what it's like. We're digitally capturing these amazing places in the world, and you can think of them as resorts where there's black diamonds and blue diamonds, and you go down one run and you see your buddy do a jump off something. You're like, I want to do that next time I come down. So those are the types of videos that you'll get from the experience.
Cool.
Yep.
Sounds amazing.
Okay, question about the technology side of things. So how do you find, I mean, you mentioned like one of the guys that jump professionally, he's like, does all this physics stuff or whatever. So how do you, with this being so new, how do you stay on top, and what do you do to kind of, I don't know, so you're just connections in the industry because you've been in it so long, or where do you recommend we go to stay on top of that, and where do you see that kind of becoming more of an everyday, because you said it's meaning, right? So how do you see this technology becoming more useful? I guess 2 questions in one.
That's a really good question. From my perspective, where things get more meaningful is when it's more personalized for you. For what Jump is doing, when you have that experience where we're recording everything that you do, we're basically recording some of the decision making that you're doing at the edge of your fears, and then you jump, right? And then we can use that information to help you overcome all kinds of other things, potentially. It's a hypothesis. So I think there needs to be more information gathering and ways for people to opt in to be able to share that, to have personalized experiences. As far as like staying on track of the new tech that's going on, it's everywhere. Like this is like the wild, wild west right now with Bitcoin and the blockchain and virtual identities and, I don't want to say the metaverse word because everybody's throwing that out everywhere, but since Zuckerberg said it, but that's a future, right? That's my digital presence of James could potentially be even more valuable than my physical, which is kind of weird to think, right? Because in the physical world, I can answer a survey and it's only kind of a version of James, or I can participate on a social media site and it's like a version of James, but there's a real future where when you're putting all of this equipment on that, it kind of knows you as an individual and can help you through things. So I think the future there is just unbelievable.
Go ahead. Somebody else? Oh. So kind of to piggyback that, with virtual reality, I think when we think of like Facebook and what Facebook and Instagram has done from maybe some of the negative side effects that I believe the founders had no idea were coming, with a lot of the psychological and emotional damage that I think now there's data that kind of shows this. Are there concerns with VR and some of these side effects that maybe we don't see right now that might manifest themselves later?
Absolutely. And I personally feel like we have amazing tools and we're using them really bad. Social media is an amazing tool to be able to connect to people. Unfortunately, it's been used in a way to get profits and keep people's eyeballs on the screens, right? And not for the best purpose. But that technology is important, and it's a part of our evolution to be responsible and have take that responsibility seriously and build experiences that use that technology to better a person, right, and to help them. And hopefully that's a shift that we see over the next little while, but there will always be kind of that yin and yang of technology. I always like to say I could have easily been a billionaire like several years ago if I had less moral values, but yeah, that's something that's always top of mind, right? It's when I did the Void, I sometimes would say I feel like a little kid wielding a gun because I don't really know like how this is impacting people, right? But you have Steam out there that's launching virtual reality simulations that feel very real to a person, and we don't know how that affects a person, right? Psychologically, it will only be until we start measuring what's going on and how we can see that impact, and then start guiding that down a path, right? From my perspective, I think that happens in location-based virtual reality, location-based experiences, because we can apply a lot more technology that gives us information on how to create those experiences, right? Because if we have more data and analytics to look at, we can say, oh, well, these are the types of things that are meaningful, and we don't need this whole contraption to do that. We just need these few variables in order to make this a meaningful experience, and so now we can deploy that on a headset at home that people have.
I really like that answer. My question kind of branches off of the same topic. Just because thinking about VR, that amount of mental stimulation does not exist anywhere in the real world. So what kind of questions are you asking your team to prevent problems that could affect people's psychological well-being in the future?
Validating our assumptions as fast as possible with data. Like we think that this is a thing. Let's measure it as fast as we can and make sure that it's a thing, and make sure that we validate our assumptions as fast as possible. It's a scientific method when it comes to something like that. But these tools are out there for anybody to create a virtual reality experience doing whatever. And so I think it's that's why there's such a wealth of opportunity right now, because you could create experiences that are deliberate to yield a result. I really feel like there's a future where my grandkids will subscribe or be a part of something where there's a curriculum of experiences that yield a result. They do these 5 things in a sequence, these 5 experiences, and they'll have this understanding. I mean, it's not that far-fetched, right? If I was like, hey, if you went mountain climbing and you started your business and you did this thing, you would have the information and the knowledge on how to take this next step. In reality, we're just doing that in a virtual sense with potentially less risk in the physical world. Psychological risk is still there. It feels very real. It feels like you're jumping off of it.
I think we got time for one more question.
I'd like to go back to when you took your first investment. How did you know you were ready to take on an investor, and what route did you choose, like a SAFE or something like that?
We did a SAFE note because that was the document that set up the company the best way. I believe from my education in the real world of taking on investments, it was a good way, and our investor was open to doing a SAFE agreement. With the Void, we did our first agreements were a convertible note debt, and there's some weird mechanics when it comes to convertible note debt that not so nice people will do. And so I had a little bit of PTSD from that. So that's probably one of the other factors on doing a SAFE note. But our investor was amazing. He actually comes from the physical therapy side of things, so he has a lot of clinics, and that's how he's made a lot of his money. So there's a future where inside of a belief system and doing normal physical therapy stuff that you're showing a person they're doing better than they think they are, that could potentially speed up the recovery process through a belief system. So anyways, that was one of the reasons why some of the vision I shared with him on where this could go. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think also just wondering, like, how far along were you?
Oh, good. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I was probably 2 years into the development, and what I mean by development is concept sketches, presentations, actually talking to engineers on how to pull off some of this stuff, lining up budgets and timelines, and all of that has to exist. You have to create all of that to show your investor that you've mitigated as many risks as possible. Like, these are the people I'm working with. I worked with them in the past. This is how I'm creating all of this stuff. Here's our timeline. Here's our budgets. Here's how we're going to spend your investment and where it will get us to. Early on, I think it's important to tell your investors, this is the point it's going to get us to. It's not going to get us potentially the final product, depending on what you're developing, but to know, like, hey, we'll get here. And the reason why we want to get here is because it represents this. This is a story we can tell. These are the things that we can show. This is the minimal viable product that we have. And so there's a lot of pre-work that you want to do as much as possible to illustrate the vision and the product before you take on investment.
Sweet. Okay, we're going to wrap up here, and I'm actually going to take because I'm the one sitting up here. Yes.
One last question online from Chris.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, good.
He says, can you discuss how we can apply these customer experience lessons you've learned more generally into other types of businesses and experiences?
I think there's still some, there's absolutely some data and analytics that we need to gather for what we're doing with Jump that I'm really excited about. I think the customer experience, the definition of a customer experience will change over the next few years because so much technology is involved and there's a lot of data and analytics. And so I think looking at other products or environments or experiences are going to change quite a bit because we'll have validated information that says if you do this, this, and this, then your customer could potentially feel like this. There's a highly likeliness that your customer will be in this psychological state when they get to this position. So that's where I think it's relevant in the future to other businesses and things that will be created. Is some of the foundational things that we're doing could empower businesses to be more successful based on data. Is that a good answer?
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to take the liberty and ask what I think is the most important question you'll be asked here today. Have you played pickleball, and do you play pickleball currently?
I do play pickleball.
All right. Okay. All right,
I actually played tennis a lot when I was a kid, and pickleball is even more fun because you're closer to the net and you have a conversation that's going on.
That's good. We'll invite you the next time we play. So.
Yeah, I'd love that.
All right, this is the last question that we ask all of our presenters. So this is, what is something fun that your success has allowed you to do? And then we'll wrap up on that question.
I think the funnest thing is just being able to be introduced to all kinds of diverse people from around the planet, being able to expand my network of people and get different perspectives. And one of the most rewarding things I've had is just seeing people experience what we've created in the past. That's so rewarding to have somebody to create a product and see somebody have a good experience with that. I can't think of anything that's better than that. It's so fun.
Love that. Thank you so much. And thank you. Can we just get a round of applause for James? So I'm going to stand up and shake your hand real quick. This is a little gift from our family to you. So thank you so much for, I'll take the mic real quick. Okay. So thank you so much for being here. And
thank you.
Thank you again all for coming.
James, thank you so much. I have to tell you all, I actually flew out to Pennsylvania and went to the beta test site where the first Jump simulator was at and had the chance to experience it. And it was an incredible experience. Exactly what James described happened at the Void happens there, where you go in an adult and you come out this kid. And I can tell you my mindset was just open to all possibilities after doing that. And I did it again and again and again. And I crashed into cliffs, and I went through the dirt and raked myself through trees. But then I actually landed, and that feeling of elation was just amazing. And then I went and did it again and again, and came down with the parachute, and it was so cool. So I see lots of applications for this. I mean, think for just a minute about the last conversation you had with a customer, a colleague, a spouse, a child, a friend, where you were trying to persuade them of something, or help them, or lift them, or create some change. And just think about the effective mindset on that. Their mindset for being open to change, believing they can change, hoping they can get better, has a huge impact. It's the foundation of all of that. And so I see this as far more than just an entertainment business play. And as exciting as all of that was to go and do that at the Jump, the most exciting and wonderful part for me was talking with James about his vision for this and all the people that he can help around the world and the millions of people that he can help overcome self-limiting beliefs. So I'm a big fan and think it's just amazing. So super excited about that and want to thank you for that. And I know many of you will want to ask him questions afterwards. We didn't have you share where they can experience this. Can you just share?
Yeah, fortunately for everybody in Utah, our first location is in Bluffdale. So it's right across from where they paraglide, which is historical, I guess, for paragliding. People fly from all over the world to train there because it's the best place on the planet, I guess. I didn't know that. But we're right in Bluffdale in a place called Rockwell Ridge. There's 2 jump bays. The simulation is made so you share it together, so you can come together and jump and fly together in these amazing places. Also, our locations will be networked together. So it's a very real future where the founder of Jump will be jumping with people in New York. I'll just warp into people's sessions and be like, hey, can I jump with you guys? I think that'll be a really fun story to tell next year when that happens. But yeah, Bluffdale, Utah. Look us up.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, I encourage all of you to go give it a try. It's a life-changing thing. And special thanks not only to James, also to Bart and to Daniel for being here and for presenting. I couldn't believe how perfect the tie-ins were between your workshop on risk mitigation and the things that you discussed today, James. It was perfect. And also, I want to thank everybody on the setup crew, on the AV group, everyone who helps prepare for this, and also to Braden for being our interviewer today. So let's give each one of them a hand. As you see on the screen, we're excited for February. We'll be celebrating Black History Month, and we've got some incredible founders coming. Dion and Marcus are great entrepreneurs. They have a wonderful restaurant called Miss Essie's Barbecue here in Utah. And you might think, oh, but I thought RevRoad was about scalable companies and not really about lifestyle companies. Well, they're scaling. They actually are selling Miss Essie's barbecue products all across the country and working on international distribution as well. So you can come and hear a story about someone who took a family business that had been in the family for generations, for decades, and decided, hey, I'm going to make this a scalable company. So it'll be a really exciting time to be a part of that. So we encourage you to be here for that. February 3rd, first Thursday, always the first Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. And we are going to be having Miss Essie's Barbecue for lunch for that day. And speaking of lunch, we have today we have boxed lunches in the back of the room, and we'd really like to recognize and thank Central Bank for being the sponsor that covers the cost of this, so it's free to you and me. We hope that you find this a great time to just network and interface with one another and ask questions and get to know someone new, especially that last part. Make sure you sit down with someone you don't know and get to know them as part of your lunch. Okay, and then lastly, we have amazing investors here at RevRoad, and some of those investors own businesses still. Some of them have sold their companies long ago. And one of those entrepreneurs is Michelle Lockhart. She and her husband Stan run a really great company called More Energy. Who could use more energy? Anybody have New Year's resolutions or goals or new habits, healthy habits that you're putting in place? Well, if it includes health, this is a great way to augment that. And it's a Christmas gift that they asked me to extend to you. They do a body scan that will give you all kinds of really deep information about the health of your body. And it's usually a couple $100 to do it. But you can have access to that for free because you're a friend of RevRoad. And so if you scan the card up there, it will the QR code, it will tell you how you can get that. I also have one of these certificates that I'll set on the table up here, and so you can go and take a picture of it there if it's not on the screen when you finish. And tell them RevRoad sent you, so you can go and participate. You just need to tell them that you're associated with RevU. So with that, thanks everyone, and we always end with our RevRoad cheer. It's very simple: ready, set, rev, and ready, set, rev. Okay, enjoy lunch.